the early universe. No, but it's also creating a lot of problems. It's destroying all the presumptions. I think that they thought should be. They're being overwhelmed. They find too many stars back there. How did they get there so quick? So I'm a religious fanatic. So whenever I read anything from physics, I write thinking, how do we prove the data is true?
Yeah.
I have a one-track mind. But they've learned over the last 100 years that how much you could know is unbelievable. One of the most remarkable things they discovered is that you could prove things physically using mathematics to a real measure that you push it cannot imagine. You can't fantasize about it. You can't picture it in your own mind. You know, our imagination is great. We can imagine a lot of stuff, right? I got boogeymen and boogie, you know what? I got all kinds of boogies, yeah. But there are things in the physical universe that are actually real that you can't even imagine. I'll give you a number of examples. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm setting up the class. Just a theory of relativity of light. Okay, let's talk about gravitation. It's a theory of light. Listen to this. People figured out about 150 years ago, don't ask me how, that light moves at 186,000 miles per second, 300,000 kilometers per second. That's so fast. Per second. Light is traveling 186,000 miles per second. Per second. It's extraordinarily fast. But they also made other discoveries which made scientists befuddled. Light never slows down and light never speeds up. I'll explain what that means, okay? If you're moving on a train and going in this direction, and there's another train going beside you in the same direction, one of you is going faster and the other is going slower, right? So one train is moving at 40 miles an hour, another train is moving 30 miles an hour. Relative to each other, one is moving 10 miles an hour, and the other is moving 10 miles an hour backwards, right? One of the trains is going in different directions. You're going at 60 miles an hour this way, and the other train is going at 60 miles an hour the other way. So you're actually going in opposite directions at 120 miles an hour because you add both speeds against each other, right? So now, if you're traveling next to a beam of light, and the beam of light is traveling 106,000 miles per second, and you're traveling at 1 mile per hour. So relative to the light should be moving at 185,999, I forgot the numbers, miles per hour, because you are going 1 mile per hour. But it's not true. When you move in the same direction as the light is still going 186,000 miles per second. This is called C, right? Which is the speed, time versus I'm saying it wrong. C is time. Forget the numbers. This is what E equals MC squared means. Here's what's interesting. If the light is going this way and you're traveling against the light is never traveling faster than 106 miles per second. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. Light is traveling and I'm traveling. So if I'm traveling in the same direction as the light, relative to me, the light should be going slower. If I'm traveling in the opposite direction of light, relative to me, it's going faster. The speed of light never changes, never. I could be traveling at 18,000 miles per hour. I could be traveling, I don't know what, very fast. I mean, relative to light, nothing is traveling fast. But no matter how fast I'm traveling, if I'm traveling in the same direction of the light is still moving at the same speed. If I'm traveling the opposite direction of light, and Einstein said, don't make no sense. And he came up with a theory which is mind-blowing. You know what the theory is? That the faster you're moving through space, the slower you're moving through, the faster you're moving through time, the faster you're moving through space, the slower you're moving through time. Time slows down. Time slows down. If you're traveling faster in space, the clock moves slower. And they've actually physically tested it. They have atomic clocks that are not affected by gravity, and they'll make two parallel clocks. They'll keep one on Earth and send one into space. They travel 18,000 miles per hour, which isn't very fast, but it's faster than any people have ever traveled. And that clock will come back a few seconds slower than the parallel clock on Earth. A few seconds of time less passed because that clock was traveling through space. They've physically proven that the faster you go through space, the slower you go through time. That's the only way to explain this incredible conundrum about light. Light is always traveling at the same speed. Or to say it in different words, at 186 miles an hour, there's no time. There's no time. It's not 100 miles per hour, per second. It's per nothing. You cannot go faster. You cannot go slower. There's no time. So the faster you're going through space, think about that. So they've proven something physically. Could you imagine that? Simple question. Can you use your fantasy to picture this? You can prove something that not only you can't explain, can't even imagine it. And it's physics. It's physics. So you know something is 100% true, and you don't have any idea how. You know it's true, can't explain it, right? Another crazy idea. It's called superposition. You know what superposition is? A physical thing can be in a place where it could be either here or here. We're not sure. What are you not sure? It's either here or here. You can be both. So they have these terms that they use. It's like a cloud, like a nebula. I've got the words that they use, but it's like not here, not there. You know, the physical example with Schrodinger's cat, you know. Is the cat died? It's dead and alive. How could they both be true? It's true. If a photon, it can only go when it's a wave. It works this way. When it's a particle, it works this way. So these are physical things that you can physically prove. Not only you can't understand it, you can't even imagine it. Can't even imagine it. Well, let me give you a Torah example for this, a Yiddishkeit example for this. The Yiddishkeit example for this is what's called in our culture Nimna Nimnois. It's a controversial subject. And it's a big debate in Gedolei Yisrael, but Chassidus takes a very, very strong position, and I guess you would say the most extreme position on the question of Nimna Nimnois. The word Nimna means impossible. Nimna means impossible. Nimna Nimnois means impossible for those who could do the impossible. It's double impossible. Okay? It's impossible for me to walk on water. But you can imagine yourself walking on water, right? You can imagine it, you can picture it. Nimna Nimnois is like walking on water and falling in at the same time. That you can't imagine. Two opposites. You understand? So there are things that we can do, natural things we can do. Miracles we can't do, but the Eibishter can do. What about things that not only you can't do, but you can't even understand, you can't even imagine? So in the Dark Ages, in the Middle Ages, when philosophy was very hot, people believed that God was like, I wonder what philosophers would do with the relativity of the speed. I wonder what they would do with it. Philosophers would say it doesn't make sense. And this is not the religion, this is pure science. If you explain to a philosopher the concept of a superposition, there's a physical thing that has particular properties, has a certain electrical charge, and you're not sure if it's here, not because you don't know, because it's in both places. Forget their tightness to religion. There's a few group of people who are making fun of Yiddishkeit because of Nimna Nimnois, because it doesn't make philosophical sense. There are physical things that make philosophical. They're scientifically proven things that we can't imagine why it is, but it is. Nimna Nimnois means that even he who can do the impossible cannot do the impossible, this, logically. What's the example? To be moving and standing still. Could you move and stand still at the same time? Now, of course, you could say, well, it depends relative to who, right? If there's 3 trains going side by side, and 2 of the trains are going 60 miles an hour, another train is going 90 miles an hour, so relative to the train on my right, I'm not moving. And relative to the train on my left, I'm moving at 30 miles an hour. You get my point, yeah? So, but that's not really moving and standing still. That's in relationship with other things. Can something in relationship with self be in moving and standing? Again, now in science, to have such concepts, right? But in religion, so this is the fundamental question. Can God do things that are impossible to understand? This question in the Middle Ages, times of the Rambam, before, a little after, 1,000 years ago, 700 years ago, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, was a huge debate. It was a debate in the Jewish world, and Lahav Lavdos in the Goyish world. And the debate was, Yesh l'em nois tevakayim or ein l'em nois tevakayim. Are there things that are even impossible for Hashem to do, or Hashem can do anything he wants? And to ask the question you asked in the first grade, and then again in the second grade, and then in the third, and you're still asking the question, you're embarrassed to ask the question is, can Hashem create a rock he can't lift? Or to ask the question in a more meaningful way, can Hashem create another Hashem? Which is the same question. It really is the same question. For God to create a rock that he can't lift, if God create a rock of which God is no master, which might as well mean God create another God. It's a much more profound way of saying the same thing. And the answer to that question is it doesn't make sense. And the answer to that answer is so. So, doesn't make sense. So what does it come down to? What does it come down to? What becomes the position, the basis for the 2 points of view? And I'm going now back to the Middle Ages. I'm not talking now the modern world. I'm talking about in the age where science was philosophy, was based on logical laws, rather than physical measuring and physical testing, right? So there were two schools of thought. And the way I like to phrase it, because I think it makes the point very acutely, very crisply, is God logic or is God the creator of logic? Is Hashem seichel or is Hashem the creator of seichel? There's a very big difference between those two things. Philosophers believe that God is logic. Secular philosophers believed that God is logic. If something doesn't make sense, it's not sensible, it's stupid. If it doesn't make sense, it's wrong. And this was the position of philosophers, that Rambam writes it. Yesh l'em nois, the things Hashem can't do. Why? Because they don't make sense. Now, what the Rambam held, what the Rambam wrote, this is another whole controversy. But Gedolei Yisrael, who spoke in the language of philosopher, the Rebbe Rashab doesn't quote the Rambam, he quotes a Sefer Ikim, when he argues with him, he says, excuse me, he's wrong. Philosophers said that if something doesn't make sense, it's false, because the foundation of the reality is sense, because God is logic. Kabbalists came up with a new idea that came Baruch HaKodesh. You can't make it up yourself. It comes to Eibishter. It's called Ein Sof. Ein Sof means many things, but one of the things that Ein Sof means Hashem is not reasonable. Hashem created reason, and he isn't necessarily bound by its laws. So if Hashem wants, he can make a rock that he can't lift. Which again, that sounds like a silly, that's what kids ask it in the second grade. And it's meant to be the kind of question that you can't answer because it's so simplistic. So just phrase the question more profoundly. Can God create another God? Which is a very meaningful question. Tzemach Tzedek answered the question by saying not only he could, but he did. Every Yid. Because we have free will. That's what Tzemach Tzedek said, which is scary. Profound, overwhelming, simple, and scary. But there's a story that Rebbe Rashab brings this. He has a little essay on this question of no. He brings the two opinions. And he brings somebody came to the Tzemach Tzedek once and said, can God create another God? Someone said, not really could, but he did. The biggest contradiction to Ach Hashem is free will. It's kind of weird if you think about it. But okay, I don't want to make this more than it has to be. But in the Middle Ages, this is how I like to phrase the question. Is God logic or is God the creator of logic? If you say God is logic, then something which is impossible to happen logically is not just wrong, it's foolish. If God is the creator of logic and is not bound by his laws, we don't know what Hashem can do. There's no reason why he shouldn't be able to do it. It doesn't have to make sense because he's not bound by those laws, right? Now, the way this plays out in our religious life, everybody knows this. We're holding before Yom Kippur this phenomenon which is called Makaim Ha'arain Einam and Hamid. The Holy Ark was a box with a very distinct measure. It was 2.5 handbreadths, cubits in length, a handbreadth and a half in width, and a handbreadth and a half in height. And above it there was cherubs, which were approximately however you figure, another handbreadth and a half or a little bit more. It sat in the middle of a room called the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. The Gemara brings us in two places. And we all wonder what the Rambam would say about this Gemara. The Rambam thought the Gemara. So how do you explain it? Since the Rambam officially was a philosopher, and he is the opinion, if something doesn't make sense, it's foolish. If you would go into the Holy of Holies with a ruler, which is a bad idea because probably would come out in one piece, but if you would go into the Holy of Holies with a ruler, and you measured the room from end to end, you'd get exactly 20 amas, 20 handbreadths east to west, 20 handbreadths north to south. If you measured the Holy Ark, you'd get 2.5 handbreadths north to south, and a handbreadth and a half east to west, and a handbreadth and a half top to bottom. But if you measure from any wall to the Holy Ark, you get a complete 10 handbreadths. Now that wasn't confusing. You're just measuring three things. You're measuring a room, and the room's dimension are 20 amas by 20 amas. You're measuring a box. It takes away space from the room, 2.5 handbreadths by a handbreadth and a half by a handbreadth and a half. And when you measure the box, it works. You measure the room, it works. If you measure the room till the box, it's as if the box isn't there. There's a complete 10 amas east of the Yarden. There's a complete 10 amas west of the Yarden. There's a complete 10 amas north of the Yarden, and there's a complete 10 amas south of the Yarden. That is not impossible. You can't even imagine it. Your fantasy, you can't picture such a thing. Try to make it this is called superposition. It's there and it isn't there. This is the Gemara says. And again, people laugh at this Torah sheet Nimna noise. There's physical illustrations of Nimna noise. Things that physically exist, which not only has mathematics proven, mathematics has tested. They found experiments that bear these ideas out, that the human mind cannot begin to imagine it, and for sure not begin to understand it. Do we agree? You see what I'm saying? It's 100% true, and I have no idea what it means.
Electrons.
Right. I gave the example of superposition. I gave two examples. The second was fine. The details are not important. I'm trying to make a point. Now, boys, I want you to think about this, okay? So imagine a person came along, and I don't know what kind of person it would be and what it would take, and actually was able to create a science. It's really, at this point, it would be a philosophy of science, a logical explanation, where you would be able to imagine it and you would be able to picture it. A scientist came along, and he was so bright, he was smarter than Einstein, or whatever, he was Einstein's genes. And he was not only able to prove this mathematical theory that the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time, but was actually able to explain it. He came up with a theory that explained what time is, better than we understand it now, explained what space is, better than we understand it now, and explained their interface, better than we understand it now, and showed why it has to be this way. In other words, he made logic out of something which right now is illogic. Imagine someone came along in 50 years from today, and it's going to happen. Everything that needs to be discovered will be discovered, and people are going to get smart. David should give chokhmah to people to use. It makes God greater. Don't misunderstand. It makes it so great. So I'm asking you a question. If some guy came along in 50 or next week, a girl, a woman, okay, a Beshrifka girl, and she not only understood the necessity for this, but actually had a way of explaining the philosophy of why this works, would she be more sure that the faster you go through space, the slower you go through time? Would she know it better than us, or would she know it just as well as we do? In other words, we're not sure?
No, we just don't know how to explain it.
I know, but are we sure of the fact? Are we sure of the fact? 1 second, you got to be patient with me. Are we 100% sure of the fact, which science has proven and tested, right? And science is not enough to come up with a theory. You have to create an experiment. They actually found ways of testing this, right? And then, of course, the famous eclipse, which are able to prove whatever it is, the curvature of light. I mean, these are brilliant ideas that Einstein came up with. And they were equally brilliant to come up with ways of showing the physical evidence of the truth of these things. If someone came along and explained them logically, would he or she be more sure of the facts than we? The answer is no, because we're sure. But is it the same? 1 second, don't help me, let me talk. Is it the same? The because I'm giving this class, I'm giving the because. It's a funny kind of thing. I know it 100%. That person can't know it more than 100%. But boy, did they know it better. You see what I'm trying to illustrate? You're 100% sure of something, but you can't picture it. You can't see it. They're not more than 100, but they can picture it. So although they don't know it more than you do, but because they can wrap their mind around it, you cannot compare how they understand something that's 100% true for you and for him or her equally, and yet they're at a totally different level of sureness, of certainty. You have no doubt, but you can't compare your not doubt to their not doubt. Does that make sense? You're 100% sure, they're 100% sure, but it's not the same sure. You follow? Let's use the example from Torah. Torah says Hashem can do two opposites, which is not only something we can't understand, we can't even picture. Aron HaKodesh sits in the middle of a room, has very precise dimensions, and exists in space, and doesn't take up space at the same time. If somebody was smart enough to come up with a philosophy or a physics that could explain how that is, not how that could be, how that is, would he or she be more sure of the fact that Makam Aron Einon Midim? No, we know it for sure. He or she knows it for sure, but they know it much better. The difference in Hebrew is a re'iyah. One sees and one doesn't see. That's what we're learning, people. Two people know for sure that Hashem gave the Torah. No question about it. One heard it from his father or his mother or her father or her mother, and the other saw it. So the second one is more sure. It can't be more than 100%, but you can't compare. You can't compare the quality of the knowledge, right? Now let's use other words, alternative words. The simple words are seeing versus hearing. Right? The Hasidic language is muhus and mitzias, and these words are really very precise in the examples that I gave. Okay? We all know the fact. Hashem came down on a mountain and he gave us Aseres HaDibros, and along with Aseres HaDibros came the 600 mitzvot, the whole situation, the whole everything. That's a fact. It's a mitzias. But if we could experience the nature of that event, we wouldn't know it more, but we would know it better. And this is called mahus, the substance. The substance. I gave a class my words last night, yeah? We all believe a prophet sees. You'll have amunah. You'll believe. A prophet sees. If I have real amunah, the prophet is not more sure than I am. But, oh, come on. The prophet sees. He experiences godliness. If you experience godliness, although you don't know it for sure more than the person who only knows about it, but the experience is so altogether different because you see it. It's so altogether different because you know the substance. And that's what this Maimon is about. Hashem gave us a Torah. It's true. And the certitude of Torah is unquestionable. But the Beis Yosef questions, and we are going to harp on this question of the Beis Yosef. We want to know it like as if we see it. We want to know it like as if we see it. We don't want to just have a Kabbalah. I believe it because my father told me, because my mother. We want to see it. So the Beis Yosef's proof is Machkimas Pesi. Any knowledge that can make fools smart, it's got to be true. The Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, brings the Beis Yosef's question, brings it, but he doesn't like it. It's his own answer. And we're in the middle of learning that answer. That Jewish law, there are situations where you can be a witness even though you didn't see it, but not in every case. When it comes to capital cases, life and death cases, if you didn't see it with your eyes, you can't testify. In other cases, you don't have to see it with your eyes, but you could still testify. This is 100%, this is 100%. But for some reason, this is 100%, but in the quality of my knowledge, there's a deficiency. And in the other case, it's 100%, but the quality is very rich because I'm able to see it. So Tzemach Tzedek says, the meaning of this puzzle, Ein Hashem Namana, is a tale that we know is true, has to be true on a level where we see it. Has to be true on a level where we sense the substance of the event of Matan Torah. So it's not like the other person is less sure. They both know 100%, but they're very, very different 100%. And I just illustrated, I think, rather clearly from physical examples. It's fascinating. You know, people still laugh at Nina the noise. They're physical examples of Nina the noise. It's stupid to say that Hashem cannot create a rock that it can't lift. Yeah. But how does it make sense to say that when I'm traveling in the same direction of light and the opposite direction of light, or I'm standing still, the speed of light doesn't change? That's also stupid. But yeah, we found the solution. Time slows down. So you found the solution for this, even though it doesn't make any common sense. You can't even imagine it. But yeah, so why can't you find a solution for this? Okay, now it's your turn. Okay, I didn't let you speak, not to go ahead. The girl in the back, don't be angry at me. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's something about theories as well. What do you think about science? Like, it's not a theory, but the fact that, like,
You have to talk a little louder.
it doesn't matter, like, basically, like, the whole idea of a lot of things that we know, the scientific theories, which doesn't mean that they're not proven, it just means that they're our best working models for the knowledge that we have. So it can also mean that somebody needs more information that would just have a better picture.
Of course, that's true. This knowledge never finishes.
So even though, like, we might have a theory that's really, really good and proven it pretty much as we possibly can, doesn't mean it's the end of the deal.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
But it's very funny how in the last 100 years, we have proven that the Newtonian theory of gravity is false. And we went to the moon using that false theory. We didn't use Einsteinian gravity. We went to the moon using Newtonian physics, which we know is true. Because it's true enough. It's true enough. It's true enough.
Wait, I heard that there's like a
But why are you whispering? Is there a reason? Is it mystical?
No, I think it's just that the
Yeah. Okay, good.
But it's that is there anything about how gravity doesn't come from like below, it comes from like above?
It's the yam yam.
Yeah.
Nobody understands that yam yam. I have my opinions about that yam yam, but I don't know what I'm talking about, and I admit that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's not yam yam. Yeah. And the Alter Rebbe was asked why people don't fall off the earth. Who live on he lived in Russia. The people who are living opposite us in America, why don't fall off the earth? And they have their answer, but it's not true. And the real answer is a system called Igulim. Igulim means that the idea that the universe is round, the earth is round, means that there's no top and bottom. There's no top and bottom, it's a philosophically very distinct idea. How that plays out in gravity, they still haven't figured gravity out. They still don't understand gravitation, making them cuckoo, making really cuckoo. Okay.
And I have a question. If we say that if someone is showing something 100%, like you said, and if I know something and I'm also showing 100%, I understand it. If we take it to a monarchy, the more I learn, I believe in a certain food, but the more I learn, I will be more sure.
Learning, no. Seeing, lirot. Seeing, I'll be more sure. Learning, not necessarily. Seeing. Good.
I wonder if this is like a good example of what you're trying to get across of like, I know my heart's beating because I'm alive. Like, you know my heart's beating. I'll say like my doctor knows my heart's beating. If I'm hooked up to like an EKG, like she knows it better than I do. Or like even more so, like seeing for yourself if like I'm in like an open heart procedure and she sees my heart beating, like she knows she sees it better than I do, but I know my heart's beating because I'm alive. And tell me it's not beating.
Yeah, I mean, you can use a million examples. I would like you to take what you're saying and go in a very different direction. But let's not talk about the physical aspect of it. Let's talk about the metaphysical aspect of it, okay? You're alive. I'm alive. I think it's true in common sense, which of course, common sense died beginning of the last millennia, and they buried him and nobody came to his funeral because all his relatives died before him. But I think it's common sense. It's certainly religiously true. There's a concept of a soul, of a neshama. The concept of the soul means that the physical reality of living things, which is amazing. If you study biology, I mean, anything you study in any field of chokhmah blows your mind. Not blows your mind because it's so smart. It blows your mind because it's so beautiful. So scientists say one thing is true about the universe, whether you believe in God or not, is its elegance. It's incredibly beautiful. Now, if someone made it by mistake, why would it have to be? It's just gorgeous. And wherever you look in the physical world, everything is so pretty. The math is pretty. Now, how could math be pretty? It just is. It's very symmetric. It's beautiful. It's a zayazay shape. It's very, very beautiful. That's physics. The human body, the body of a single-celled organism, every living thing is so amazingly beautiful. And it's got many, many parts. And they fit together in a harmony. We call it an organism because it's very organized. It's very unified, right? We believe, and again, I'm going to say that Mr. Common Sense, may he rest in peace, would have contended, or Ms. Common Sense, or they Common Sense, would have contended that this degree of exactitude can't possibly be explained by the physical and the chemical and the biological alone. It's too perfect. It's so perfect that there's something outside of the physical that's making it this perfect. We call that a soul. The soul of a human being, the soul of an animal, even the soul of a plant. So now one person says, no, it's the arrangement of atoms into chemicals, the arrangement of chemicals into organic material, the arrangement of organic material into simple organic beings that then coalesce into larger and more complex and more sophisticated organic entities until you have the human eye, human mind, human brain. So one person is saying the physics alone explains it. The other person says, no, this is too exact. There's a neshama behind it. It's a soul. So now, if you and I accept a soul, there's a big difference between how you know your soul and how I know my soul. The doctor can open me up and see my heart beating. He can't see my neshama. You're alive. And when we say word alive, I don't mean alive as opposed to the opposite of alive. You're alive in so many dimensions, including joy and freedom and exhilaration and opportunity and optimism and all the other things that over the course of our lives, the world tries to kill and we have to hold on to. We call that by a very bad name. We call that religion. But the real meaning of life, you know you're alive and I know I'm alive. But you know you're alive very differently than you know I'm alive. You can't explain your soul, but you understand your soul almost like you could see it. I understand your soul because I understand my own. But I don't understand your soul the way you understand it because I'm not in your body. So am I less sure that you have a neshama than I have a neshama? No, equally sure. But am I in touch with with my certitude about your neshama the way I'm in touch with my certitude about my own neshama. You follow? So I'm taking your example, but I'm flipping it exactly the opposite way. I'm saying, let's not talk about the physical. And you know you're alive a lot better than your doctor ever will. Which is why in Jewish law, this is again Hilchos Yom Kippurim, which is coming up in a few days, a patient is his best diagnostician. If the doctor says the patient has to eat and the patient says I don't have to, he doesn't eat. If the doctor says the patient doesn't have to eat and the patient says they have to eat, he eats. Because you live in your body. Now, the doctor understands why you need to eat. The doctor understands what happens better when you don't eat. The doctor understands the nature of the stresses on your body. The doctor understands much better than you the compromise in a particular person's physical body, which don't allow him to impose those kind of stresses associated with fasting in his body, which is why he needs to eat. And the patient knows better. Because the doctor understands it, all the patient understands nothing, but the patient knows. How the patient knows is not medical. It's not scientific. It's visceral. It's kishkish. He's experiencing his life. He says, I can fast. I can fast. So the doctor's sure, you're sure, but there's a different level of sureness. You follow? Anybody else? So now I'm going to give you two choices. Okay, you want to take a break? You want to keep going? I say we break. And the primary reason to break is that we shouldn't continue this conversation. I prepared this class and I said, I got to come up. I think this is very helpful. I didn't say anything new. I sat down this morning and I listened to the end of the class I gave last week. I didn't add it. This is a clarity of it. The idea that two people know for sure, but it's not the same for sure. That's what this Maimon is arguing. So come back in 5. Wait. How many minutes? How many seconds is 5 minutes? Machlokes depends which week. Okay. I'm going to turn this off. Someone's going to turn it back on.